Welcome to Big Blend Radio Success Express Show, where we talk about business, leadership, and career development. It is the third Thursday, and that means it's time for Trust Talk with Lea Brovedani, the Trust Architect. You can keep up with her at thetrustarchitect.biz. And Lea, you just came off a cruise ship. You were on what, 3 weeks, 2 weeks on a cruise ship doing
almost,
Trust Talk?
I think it was 16, 17 days of transatlantic cruise, and I spoke on board, which was just a blast. Huge stage. You know, the cruise ship stages are beautiful, and had a blast. Yeah.
I just didn't think that people were doing kind of business style courses on, like seminars on a cruise ship. And today we're going to actually focus on one of them, of one of your speaking points, which is the Trust Rule Book, How to Lead with Integrity in an Uncertain World. And I wanted to talk about that because I think a lot of us are feeling our world is flipped upside down, no matter what, political party, I'm just going to say, and we're not going to get into politics, but things are feeling uncertain. And I think it's been that way for a long time. Actually, I think back to the very first chat we had on the Big Blend, and we were in Kentucky, and it was crazy because we got locked out of the office after that happened, and the lady that we were working with actually got arrested. How about that? Talk about uncertainty and leading with trust. Like, her board went after her and some stuff happened, and yeah, crazy, huh?
Yeah.
But we
what
ended
was
up
nice on board the cruise ship is I think there was over 19 countries represented on this cruise ship, and
wow.
close to 3,000 people, and it was bliss. It was just such an enjoyable, everybody got along, everybody was happy. It was a little fake bubble that I want to live in forever.
But 3,000 people, right? And so all these different countries, and then you're talking about trust and leading with trust. And I know you also talk about emotional intelligence.
Yes.
So was that what was some of the most popular speeches that you did?
The first one that I did was, with emotional intelligence, understanding emotional intelligence to improve your life. And the first one was probably one of the more popular ones. I had a number of people come up to the stage later. I mean, I'm used to that because I've been a professional speaker for years. And if a talk resonates with people, you want to see people gathered to talk to you afterwards. And that one probably had the most people. And I had people come up to me later and tell me what a difference it made in how they viewed the world. And so that was really important because I gave kind of the basics for, two different models: perceiving emotions, using emotions, understanding emotions, and managing them in yourself and others. So, how to apply that in a bunch of stories. And so that was probably really powerful. And then how to tell whether or not someone could be trusted was the other one really popular.
So let's look at today when we talk about leading with integrity and, leading with trust and integrity.
Right.
How much emotional intelligence is connected with that? Isn't it all emotional intelligence in that, like, isn't emotional intelligence at the end of the day stopping and thinking before you react?
Yeah, it's not like it's all, I remember the first time when I first started talking about emotional intelligence, and I didn't have the background that I have now. And a woman came up to me at the end of my presentation and said, "I'm so glad you told me that my being emotional is okay, because I've always been told I was too emotional." And I went, "Oh, I missed the mark." Because it's not saying that every time you feel an emotion, just give it full vent. It means being aware of your emotions and then managing them. Emotions and intelligence, your cognitive intelligence combined, are what makes emotional intelligence work. So it is, like, if you feel something, it should make you curious. And it should be, I'm feeling angry, and having that 6-second pause and saying, well, what am I going to do with it? And then applying the management of intelligence and emotions to get the best possible income. So emotions are information combined with intelligence, that's where the emotional intelligence comes in. So when
I have a friend who says facts first. You're allowed to freak out later. Look at the facts and work with the facts and tell yourself you can freak out, you can cry, you can yell, you can do whatever you want later. But right now, and if there's a situation, work on the facts and stay neutral on the facts, period. What do you think about
and
that?
then use it, there was years ago, had a van and we had taken it in to get new tires and they had not tightened the back tire. It was ready to fall off. And I called them and they ignored me. And then I had to pull over. I had, I think it was the Motor Association come out and they came and they said, well, the wheel's ready to fall off. If you would have gone a few more miles. And I had a van full of kids driving down a highway. If the wheel would have come off going
Yeah.
80 miles an hour, because I usually speed, if
Well,
it would have come off, it would have been
you're in Texas at that point. Let's just tell everybody you're in Texas or Mississippi where they are 80-mile-an-hour.
So I had a van full of kids, and the car dealership didn't take responsibility for the fact that the wheel was loose. I had complained a couple of times and they ignored me. And I really felt at the time they ignored me because I was a woman. When my husband called in, all of a sudden they listened to what he had to say. So now I'm twice as angry and using that anger to actually make the point that here's what could have happened. And here's what I will do if you don't take responsibility for it. So it was, and it wasn't a matter of threats. It was, this is what I'm going to do because I also write.
Mm,
And
yeah.
letting other people know about the car dealership and not taking responsibility. So anger is an emotion that gives you information. And at times it's just this really beautiful catalyst to get things accomplished. So,
Because you wouldn't normally do that if you weren't
no,
pushed to that limit. Because when someone is or
yes,
something has pushed you beyond that line, then you're going to say, hey, you've gone beyond the line, right? So,
absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So there's no bad or good emotion. It's what you do with the emotion
mm,
that creates the intelligence. And how does that relate to trust? Well, the same thing that you have to be able to be aware of your emotions and how you're impacting others. And if you look at my model of
mm,
trust, it's caring, commitment, consistency, competence, and communication. So caring obviously is an emotion. And how
mm,
do you know someone cares? And so you have to be able to read emotions in
mm,
yourself and others, and people will trust you more if they believe that you genuinely care. And then I would take it even further and say, what does that look like? What does caring
mm,
look like? What does caring look like to you? If I'm to show you that I care about you, everyone's
mm.
different. What does it look like?
Let's talk about integrity because you talk
Okay.
about leading with integrity. And I feel like integrity includes caring and consistency and commitment really strong. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
all five of your tenets of trust, right? But I feel like integrity, you can't have integrity without the consistency and commitment to being consistent. The minute you drop the ball on being consistent, you could drop the ball and say, hey, I messed up, right?
Yeah.
See
Yeah.
how good I was with my language there? Just saying, you know how we are on the show.
Yeah.
I
So
was good. I was good,
people,
right?
if you don't know, Lisa and I, both of us have learned how to,
Salty. We're
yeah,
salty.
we're
We're
like,
straight to the point. Let's put it
yeah,
that way.
like,
Um, but consistency, you can you can mess up, and
yeah.
if you don't fess up on the mess up,
I
then
like
you're
that.
going to lose it. You, to me, I don't think everyone's perfect. So consistency, you're allowed to mess up, right?
Oh my
At
gosh,
some point.
we all do.
And if you stand up and say, all right, oopsie, and there you go. Not a big deal.
Yeah.
But commitment, your commitment has to be there behind the consistency, and the caring has got to be center forward, like caring for the company, the project, the campaign, whatever it is, that caring, you have to have when people know you're wearing your heart on your sleeve, I think they follow. Does that make sense? Does that right? Am I wrong? Not
Um,
not like a Joan of Arc. I'm not talking that, I'm saying like you care, not caring to the point of being you're still rational. Let's put it that way.
yeah. And I think that people who are following a leader, and by the way, this changes from country to country as well, because I have a good friend who teaches leadership and especially emotional intelligence around the world. And a shout out to my friend Brent Darnell.
Mhm.
Brent was teaching some of the components of emotional intelligence, and I'm trying to remember the country he was in. But when he talked to the people within the company, they saw a leader who sought input from the people who worked for him as a weakness. They said, no, the boss tells us what to do and we do it. So it's very different from a North
Mhm.
American perspective where we want to have consensus to a certain,
Okay.
you still want the leader who makes the final decision, but most of the time we want input. We want to
Mm,
be allowed to give our input.
mm,
So integrity, I think the consistent thing around the world, the consistency around the world as far as integrity is doing what you say you'll do, which is part of the commitment.
mm,
So having trust that someone is actually going to carry through on what they promised, first of all.
mm.
And if something changes, because things can change,
Oh, well, that's normal.
going and circling back and saying, we said that we were going to do this, but A, B, C, and D has happened now, and it has changed the outcome. So you need to understand that we're not going to be able to give, because right now, look at the turmoil in the world. And so if people have been promised huge bonuses, but now all of a sudden the bottom is dropped out of the value of the company stock, they have to,
It's like you were going to keep your job right now
yeah, yeah.
more than the bonus.
Whatever is happening, like you want to be able to say, yes, we're going to keep that commitment of giving you the bonus, but going forward, this is what's going to happen. Integrity means being transparent, being authentic,
Ooh,
and doing what you say you do.
mm. So honesty.
Yes. And
Mm,
what does that look like?
mm.
Because I've heard people say, I'm just being honest. And they're not, they're giving an opinion. So you have to understand what's the difference between
Oh,
honesty and just an opinion.
oh. So we're going back to the hard facts thing that I was talking about then.
Yeah.
Mm, mm.
And people will even, good Lord, look at what's going on in the world right now. I hear, I think there was something called alternate facts, which is just not even a thing. So facts should be the same for everyone. The fact that there is a moon in the sky is a fact. If some people don't,
And by the way, the world is round. That's a fact. I need to
that is
say
a
that
fact.
very strongly. No, we're not going to skate into a wall of ice. I'm just going to say that. Can we just stop it, people? I don't know why you want to do that. If that's, I don't know why, but can we stick to facts?
Yes. And so the facts have to be something, and I used to say facts should be evident to everybody. And what I've discovered the longer I live is that facts aren't always evident to everybody.
No, that's
So,
the truth.
the whole thing about, I talked about facts, opinions, or beliefs. So a fact, and the example that I gave is as of 2024, I think there was close to 700 astronauts around the world. So from since the astronaut program started. So, like that number might not be exact. And out of that, I think 100 were women. So
Ooh,
look at 100 were women, 600 were men. That is a fact that you can check on the NASA.org website.
yeah,
So an
maybe.
opinion would be that women are discriminated against. There's no way of knowing that. You would have to go back and interview every single person and find out why they didn't hire them. It's an opinion,
Ah, that's true.
okay? And a belief would be women should not be working outside of the home. They should be homemakers. That might be a belief. So women are not qualified to be astronauts, could be a belief. So when someone says, I'm just telling you the honest truth, I would ask, is it a fact? Is it an opinion? Or is it a belief?
Mm, opinion and beliefs are pretty close hand holders, right?
Yeah.
And a belief becomes something that is built into a culture at a specific
A
time.
value. It could be a value. It could be a religious belief. It could be,
It's what you, it's a part of you
uh-huh.
versus, oh, this is what I think, kind of like an opinion versus a belief. An opinion can turn into a belief, is my point, I think, is
Yeah,
what I'm
yeah.
saying.
So what is the difference? And so when someone says, I want you to be brutally honest. Well, I don't want someone to be brutally honest. I want them to be compassionately honest, first of all.
Nice,
And
nice.
if that's part of integrity. So when you're looking at integrity, compassion, caring, and facts, you can see they all come together. So you
Mhm.
want people that you can trust.
So are you like Nancy and I who don't enjoy it when people say, let me play devil's advocate? You know,
I
that's
don't
kind of, it's not a nice way of saying, hey, let me give you an alternate
know
viewpoint.
the fact. Yeah.
Let me get or a viewpoint, an alternate view. It's like, oh, let me play devil's advocate. Like I'm gonna try and beat you out of this kind of thing. It just feels a little evilish, you know.
Well, part of it, because I used to have teams, and I know you probably did too, and I would lead teams and I put together some conferences where you'd have a whole group. And I can be a bit of a Pollyanna optimist and not see all the problems. So
Mm,
on every team that I have, I want a pessimist, and I'm not always comfortable with them. It's that person who goes, well, that
okay.
won't work. And to me, when you see them go, well, that won't work, I want to hit them,
Yeah,
but I also appreciate them and I want them on my team.
because it makes you want to prove them wrong, which means you're
I
gonna do a
want to
better
find
job.
out all the problems that can happen so that I can fix them before we get to that problem. So on any
So
team,
the devil's advocate and the whiny person are a good thing.
absolutely.
Oh, did I say something I'm not supposed to say? Is that politically incorrect to say someone who's whiny? Or is that an opinion? Ah,
It's an opinion. And
I
and
can get away with
sometimes,
an opinion.
yeah, sometimes, like I see people as being whiny too.
Yeah, stop it.
That's my opinion. Someone comes up and goes, why do I have to do that? I'd go, do you want some
If you're going to do
of that
that voice,
wine?
that's annoying. I don't, the voice. What, by the way, what is that
What?
lately with women and their voices? Like, wah, 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 wah. Like, you know
That's
what I mean?
always been. I think it's always been, and it's the same thing with, you know, if we're
Uh-oh, we're
gonna,
going to get in trouble just now.
I absolutely appreciate different opinions. It's not like I always like them, though. It's not like I always enjoy them.
But
And
can
I
we
think
just change that? Wah, 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 wah,
you and I are pretty pragmatic.
wah. But really, women, what are we doing? I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there as playing devil's advocate that I don't like. That it
Well,
kind of
I've
like, can we
met just
stop
as
that
I've met
voice?
some pretty whiny men too, so I'd say that
Oh,
there's whiny
that's
people.
true. I've heard a lot of men do the wah, 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 wah thing too.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
I don't
kind
think
of
it's a
like,
gender thing. I think that it's just a personality thing.
oh, that's interesting. So that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, aren't we nice? Okay. So going back to leading with integrity and
Yeah.
compassion, you don't do what Lisa just did and go, well, wah, 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 wah. So if someone comes into your office and you go, well, you've got one of those wah, 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 wah voices. That is not
No,
how
don't
you
do
lead
that.
with
No.
integrity. So that's okay. You can give it to me because I don't, lead anybody.
So leaders have to walk the talk and they have to
Oh,
honor commitments. So if they've made a commitment to someone, big or small, they have to circle back if for any reason they can't do it. So especially like in this climate, um,
mm,
you have to honestly, I believe that you have to spend more time talking to people. You
I
can't
think I
assume
think
that
we're in
people,
a huge communication is key right now
yeah,
on
yeah,
everything, and to see and to give each other some slack
yeah.
in some way. Does that make sense? Like I
Oh,
think that.
absolutely. Yeah, I think so too. So you look at integrity and what are some examples? Lack of integrity shows up in taking credit for someone else's work. And I've seen that. I think we've
Ew,
all seen that. And
ew.
as soon as that happens, I've seen leaders who've had people working for them and they have, yeah, they're head of the team and they've taken credit for what has happened
Hmm.
instead of saying, okay, our team worked really, really hard on this, but I want to tell you about so and so who put in this many hours and this much work, and we would not have gotten to this point without their input. Integrity is being able to give people credit for the work they do. That's one
Mm,
part. And if you're a leader and you're not giving the people who work for you credit for the work they're doing, they'll see it as a lack of integrity.
mm. Exactly. And once you lose integrity, can you build it back? That's another talk, isn't it? That's a whole other
Yeah, I
show.
talk
Yeah.
about how to rebuild trust, but I can tell you that it's a lot harder to rebuild it than it is to maintain it. So best thing
Yeah.
is not to lose it in the first place. And
Mm.
it just, like if it doesn't feel right, if you're taking credit for someone else's work and it happens on a regular
Mm.
basis, pretty soon people are going to know what you're about and it's going to come back and get you.
Well, let's actually look at trust. How
Okay.
many times do people go into a position or want to get into a leadership position, you know, and I don't care where you are and what company, I don't care if you're self-employed or freelancer, all of that. Trust is a component that makes everything work in some
Yes.
place if you build it. But how many people don't even look at trust being a component of success?
I think it's
I mean, have
because
you realized that as a trust expert, like that trust has to, like, have you gone into a company and said, like, hey, your makeup doesn't even include trust as being part of the leadership?
And too many times, and I've talked to Barbara Brooks Kimmel, and Barbara, for some reason, my brain isn't, but Barbara talks about the fact that companies talk about trust, and they're not really talking about trust, they're talking about reputation. And so they hire
Yes.
firms that are all about
Let's fix our Google reviews.
uh-huh. And they're not building trust. They're not doing things that are actually trustworthy. They're
The
just
cleanup
working
crew,
on having a cleanup crew, or they hire a publicist to give them a great tagline. But it's,
who says also that bad publicity is good publicity, right?
oh Lord, yeah.
Sorry. I played devil's advocate. I did it. Sorry, everybody. It is like this. But no, but that's the truth. It's
Yeah.
better to go in because that's what I was wondering is like, how many people think that trust, like, do they put that in their plan of leadership? Do they sit down and go, this is how I'm going to be as a leader, and trust is part of it?
Yeah, they do. And then but the actions don't show that they're actually doing things around trust. It's one of those things that people will talk about it. Trust is really important to our organization, and trust is one of our benchmarks and hallmarks and values. And when as a trust coach and trainer, I'll say, well, tell me some things that you do to build trust as a leader.
Mm.
And when we've done 360s, and people have evaluated, leaders have evaluated their trustworthiness
Mm-hmm.
and how much they're trusted, and then they have their staff evaluate them. There is usually anywhere a 15 plus discrepancy between how leaders perceive their trust and how they're actually people are actually trusting them. So that's a big thing.
Ooh. Ooh. So then you have to really look at what your behavior, you have to be, so going to the leader, do they have to start taking stock and doing those kinds of surveys and start to fix and be realistic with feedback?
Yeah, and it's not always easy because I've talked to leaders and they've said there's times when I absolutely cannot give people. Someone will come up to me and say, here's an example. There was a company that was going through a takeover and it had to be kept quiet because of the
Yeah.
stocks and everything else and insider trading. And some of the employees were coming up, it was before Christmas, and they said, will I have a job? And the leader knew that they were going to be laying off a bunch of people. And he said, how do I stay as a trusted leader when I am not allowed to say anything? I could be sued heavily if I said anything. And so one of the tricks, it's not a trick. One of the values that I learned from a trusted leader, Harry Harrington, who used to be head of NIC. Anyways, I won't. He said, you tell them what you can, you tell them what you can tell them, and you can tell them what you can't tell them.
Mm.
So he would say, it sounds like you've got some concerns. And, you know, and then he would ask them questions. And so he would say, at this point, I can't talk about anything.
But if you have concerns and you're worried about that and you feel like your family needs to come first, then I would focus on that kind of thing. I
And
had
that's exactly what you do perfectly. So
yeah.
that was exactly what you would say as a leader.
Well, I have a friend. Oh, he's passed. He's a sweet man. Very strong leader. Oh my God, this man could debate. Oh, he did such amazing work. And he was on our show for years on wildlife conservation and did debates like you wouldn't believe, like what he took on. And I would sit back and watch things, and I learned so much about. And you want to talk about integrity? He led. He was everything. He was a pillar of truth and compassionately truthful. Even when he debated and someone was horrible and did nasty jabs, he stayed the high road. And I always looked at him going like, how the hell did you do this? And
Yeah.
and I think about it like, oh, like amazing, right? And he would always, like, if someone confronted him in a vulgar way, he would just kind of walk away and not deal with it because it wasn't worth the energy. The energy was to do justice, right? And I remember watching some specific debates, but then he left a career, a role, a position that we're all very connected with in this organization. And he left and he told his publicist, make sure you get hold of Lisa and Nancy and make sure they have my personal email. And she did. And, because we'd always dealt in this business way and through everything, it didn't matter. It was his email. And he made sure we had his communication, because we'd communicated all these ways. And so we got in touch like pretty quickly. And he said, Lisa, um, everybody walked when I left. And that's going to tell you all you need to know,
Wow.
basically.
That's
And from there, I went, holy cow, if he walked and then the staff all walked, this tells us not to do any more promotion of this organization. It was a
wow.
nonprofit. And I mean, this is a lifelong thing, and this is a very deep thing. And it was like a blow of integrity to him, to the employees, the people on the ground doing the work. It was a blow to even Nancy's life, growing up in my life in this work. And we were all like, whoa. And he goes, just take it from there. And in other words, he also took this integrity of, I'm not going to blab because you're still press, right? And so he's not going to badmouth. He could if I wanted to get into that, but it
Right.
was enough to say, I trust him enough to already know he would never have left if it wasn't bad.
Wow. And
And
that's the
so
reputation
that's
of trust.
huge.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
everything you talk about a leadership, I mean, everybody walked. Everybody walked. And let me tell you, that organization is pretty much no longer. And that sounds bad. People go, oh, well, a leader should have it where it can continue on. Not if the organization, like ownership, is corrupt.
Right, right.
He wasn't. He led by pure compassion and integrity and transparency on everything. And so, when I look at that, he's a role model in my life, like a mentor. And I wish I had told him, hey, you're a mentor on so many levels of how not to tell people where to go when I talk to him. You know what I mean? He had this very like a diplomat,
Wow.
but strong,
Yeah,
like a true leader. That to me was everything. Like, how do you do that and not like really lose it?
yeah.
He had cocktails
Leading
at the
through
end of the day.
example. Yeah,
He
that makes it.
did. But does that make sense about people leaving
Oh,
when
yeah.
they're not being led that way?
Yeah.
Properly, when a leader leaves a company, that means it's something stinky, something's rotten in Denmark, as we used to say.
You know, I have said this that when I've walked into organizations, I can feel if there's trust within, within the organization. And there's something that I listen to. First of all, if I can hear laughter, I know that it's an
Oh,
organization where people can trust each other because they're not afraid to share laughter. And I've heard people say they shouldn't be laughing, they should be heads down and working. Well,
mm,
if you are, it has actually been proven that people who are happy at their place of work are more productive.
teamwork.
So, and people who trust are happier people. And so
Mm,
you can tell, you can walk into a place, and if everybody is really uptight and they're afraid to say anything, it means that there is a lack of trust within the organization. So
mm,
when I say I can feel whether or not there's trust within the
mm,
organization, those are kind of the benchmarks that I look at. Are
mm.
people open enough to be like cheerful with each other and share things,
Yeah.
and then you're going to look to the leader, and are they competent to be able to do what they say they're going to do? And we've seen what happens when we have leaders who do not have the competency to run whatever. And I won't say anything more. Looking at Lisa's face, and she's just going, don't go there, Lee.
I'm behaving. I was behaving. I
Yeah.
was. Well, no, but that's the truth. You look at many companies and somebody will get there because they've social climbed.
Or nepotism or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, you somehow get up there. And if you don't have the competency, then everything's going to derail,
Yeah.
and you may have some people there like, hey, dude, you're not running the ship well. Let me help. And if you don't take it, you could be a token leader and have the right people with you to
Yeah.
keep making the ship run if you're nice. But if you're not nice, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So okay, in closing, what would you say to someone who's in a leadership capacity right now that they should look at to be a trusted leader? What is
Oh,
one thing that they should do to really kind of look at, like, as homework? Sorry,
okay.
I want to give someone homework today. I don't
Okay.
know.
So make sure that you hire people who are competent and can do their jobs. Don't micromanage. Do
Ooh.
what you say you'll do. Stand behind your people, support your people. Use mistakes as learning opportunities. If a person keeps making the same mistake, it means they're in the wrong position and you need to either train them or let them go.
Mm,
So there's a number of steps, but care about the people try and make sure that they've got the opportunities to do the best that they can do. Commit to doing what you say you'll do. Make sure that you have the skills to manage.
Mm-hmm.
And like we've talked about consistency, and then communicate to people. And during times of uncertainty, or if there's things that are happening that are causing a disruption, communicate, over communicate. Right now, at this point in time in the world, you should be communicating with your staff all the time and
Mm.
find out what it is that they need, find out what their concerns are. People are scared. People
Mm-hmm.
are scared right now. Show that you care by communicating with them and let them know what's happening in your organization. And if you don't know, find a way of letting them know you don't know.
Mm. Very cool. Lee, good advice as always. Everyone, the trustarchitect.biz. Now is a time to really, ramp up on the trust level. Really, transparency is
Awesome.
key. So always good stuff, Lee. I hope you go on more cruises. Like I want to hear more.
Yeah, I am. I
Next, you
am.
are? You are? Are we
Yeah.
going to do a podcast when you're on a cruise next time?
Oh, we could try that. They're sending me all kinds of cruises. Like the last one was really successful, so now they're sending me quite a few more to pick from. So and more cruise lines. So I'll
Oh,
let
well, excuse us. Can I be
you
part of the
know.
picking process?
Yeah, it's fun speaking on board a cruise ship. It is.
Awesome. Thank you, Lee. Everyone, the trustarchitect.biz. She is here every third Thursday here on Big Blend Radio.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio Success Express Show. This show is brought to you by Big Blend Magazines. You can keep up with us at bigblendradio.com and check out our magazines at blendradioandtv.com.